The crimson sunset painted the vast Montana Territory sky as Catherine Wilson scrubbed another sheet against the washboard, her raw fingers leaving faint bloodstains on the once white linen. It was 1875, and like most women in the frontier town of Silver Creek, laundry was just one of the endless chores that filled her days and one of the cruelest to her hands. Catherine had arrived in Silver Creek just 3 months prior, following the death of her father back east. With no inheritance to speak of beyond a letter from her late uncle mentioning property in Montana Territory, she had sold what little she owned in Philadelphia and purchased passage west. The property turned out to be a dilapidated cabin on the edge of town with a leaky roof and little else. At 22, Catherine was alone in a harsh land with dwindling funds and few prospects. Taking in laundry had seemed the obvious choice. The mining town had plenty of men who needed clean clothes but lacked the inclination or ability to wash them. The work was steady, if grueling. The lye soap ate at her skin, the scrubbing board roughened her palms, and the constant wringing left her fingers cracked and bleeding. She winced as she plunged her hands back into the cold water, continuing her work despite the stinging pain. There were still 5 shirts to finish before sundown. Her small yard was festooned with drying linens and garments, flapping like pale ghosts in the late afternoon breeze. "Miss Wilson," a deep voice called from the road, causing Catherine to look up from her work. Adam Thornton sat atop his chestnut gelding, hat in hand. His dark hair caught the golden light of the setting sun, and his weathered face bore the evidence of years under the open sky. At 30, he was the foreman of the Rockingham Ranch, the largest cattle operation in the county. "Mr. Thornton," she acknowledged with a slight nod, quickly wiping her hands on her apron and tucking a loose strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "I have your shirts ready, just need to iron them come morning." Adam dismounted, tying his horse to the hitching post before approaching. Catherine was acutely aware of her disheveled appearance, hair coming loose from its pins, sleeves rolled up, and apron soaked. She had seen Adam Thornton in town since her arrival and had exchanged pleasantries when he'd brought his laundry, but they'd never shared more than a few words. "No rush, Miss Wilson. I don't need them until—" He stopped mid-sentence, his brow furrowing as he noticed the pink-tinged water in the basin. His eyes dropped to her hands, which she instinctively tried to hide in the folds of her apron. "Your hands," he said softly, stepping closer. "May I?" Catherine hesitated but then extended her hands, palms up. The skin was red and raw, with small cuts across her knuckles and fingertips. Some were fresh and still seeping blood. Adam gently took her right hand in his, examining the damage with a frown. His own hands were calloused and rough from ranch work, but surprisingly gentle as they cradled hers. "Those hands were made for holding, not this kind of punishment," he said quietly, his blue eyes meeting hers. Catherine felt heat rise to her cheeks, unsure how to respond to such an unexpected statement. "It's just laundry, Mr. Thornton. All women's hands look like this." "Not where I come from," he replied, still holding her hand, "and they shouldn't anywhere." An awkward silence fell between them as Catherine carefully withdrew her hand. "Was there something else you needed, Mr. Thornton?" Adam cleared his throat, suddenly seeming to remember himself. "Actually, yes, Mrs. Mitchell at the boarding house mentioned you might be looking for additional work. We need someone at the ranch to help with cooking and housekeeping. Our previous housekeeper left to get married last month." Catherine's heart quickened. The laundry work barely covered her expenses. "I would be interested, though I'd still need to complete my current commitments in town." "Of course. You could stay at the ranch during the week and return to town for a day or two as needed. The pay is $15 a month, with room and board included. It was a generous offer, nearly twice what she was making now with her laundry business. "When would you need me to start?" "Monday next, if that suits you." Adam retrieved his hat, turning it in his hands. "I could come by with the wagon to collect you and your things." "That would be acceptable, thank you." Catherine offered a small smile, suddenly very conscious of how bedraggled she must look. Adam nodded, replacing his hat. "I'll be by around 9 then." He turned to leave but paused. "And Miss Wilson?" "Yes." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small tin. "My mother swore by this salve for working hands. Beeswax and lanolin, mainly, might help with." He gestured toward her raw fingers. Catherine accepted the tin with a surprised "thank you." "Till Monday, then." With a tip of his hat, he mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Catherine standing beside her washtub, the small tin clutched in her bleeding hands. That night, after applying the salve and wrapping her hands in soft strips of cloth, Catherine sat by her small hearth contemplating the unexpected turn of events. The ranch job would be hard work, certainly, but perhaps not as physically punishing as the constant laundry. And room and board meant she could possibly save nearly all her wages. She examined her bandaged hands in the firelight. "Made for holding," he had said. Such a strange, intimate thing for him to say to a woman he barely knew. Catherine had received her share of attention from men since arriving in Silver Creek, mostly unwanted, but Adam Thornton's concern had seemed genuine, without ulterior motive. Monday came quickly. Catherine had spent the weekend finishing her laundry orders and making arrangements with Mrs. Mitchell to check on her cabin while she was away. She packed her few belongings in the trunk her father had given her for her 18th birthday, leaving behind the furniture and kitchen items that came with the cabin. True to his word, Adam arrived at 9 sharp, driving a wagon rather than riding his usual mount. He helped load her trunk and then offered his hand to assist her onto the seat. "Your hands look better," he observed as she settled beside him. Catherine nodded, grateful for the salve he'd provided. "They're healing nicely, thank you." The journey to the Rockingham Ranch took nearly 2 hours, giving Catherine her first real glimpse of Montana Territory beyond the confines of Silver Creek. The landscape was breathtaking rolling grasslands that seemed to stretch endlessly toward distant mountains, broken occasionally by stands of cottonwood trees along creek beds. "It's beautiful," she murmured, taking in the vastness. Adam nodded, a hint of pride in his expression. "Most beautiful country God ever made, in my opinion. Been here 10 years now and never tire of the view." "You're not from Montana originally, then?" "Texas born and raised. Came north with a cattle drive when I was 20 and never went back." "Old man Mitchell, that's Matthew Mitchell. The ranch owner took me on as a hand, then made me foreman 5 years back when his health started failing." Catherine found herself curious about this man who had shown her such unexpected kindness. "And your family, are they still in Texas?" A shadow passed over Adam's face. "Lost my pa to the war. Ma followed a few years later. Just my younger brother left, and he's off seeking his fortune in California gold country." "I'm sorry about your parents," Catherine said softly. "I lost my father 6 months ago. Mother passed when I was 12. Adam glanced at her, a new understanding passing between them. "Seems we have that in common then, not much family left." The conversation flowed easily after that, with Adam pointing out landmarks and telling stories of his years in the territory. Catherine found herself laughing at his tales of cattle drives gone awry and the colorful characters he'd encountered. As they crested a hill, the Rockingham Ranch came into view in the valley below. Catherine's eyes widened at the sight. The main house was substantial, built of logs but far larger than she had expected, with glass windows and a proper porch. Several outbuildings, corrals, and a bunkhouse completed the scene. In the distance, cattle dotted the hillsides. "It's much bigger than I imagined," she admitted. Adam nodded. Mitchell started with nothing 20 years ago, built it all himself, then kept expanding. The house was the last thing he improved, added the east wing 5 years back when his daughter married. His daughter lives here too. Sarah and her husband Robert manage the books and supplies. They have 2 little ones, Emma and James, 4 and 2. You'll be helping with them some too, I expect. As they approached the ranch, Catherine felt a flutter of nervousness. This was so different from the solitary existence she'd been leading in her small cabin. The prospect of living among strangers, even kind ones, was daunting. Adam seemed to sense her anxiety. "They're good people, Miss Wilson. The Mitchells treat their workers like family." She offered him a grateful smile as he brought the wagon to a halt in front of the main house. Before he could assist her down, the front door opened, and a woman about Catherine's age hurried out, a young child on her hip and another trailing behind her skirts. "You must be Miss Wilson," the woman called, her face bright with a welcoming smile. "I'm Sarah Mitchell-Peterson. We're so pleased you've come. Father's been telling us we needed a new housekeeper for ages, but Adam's the only one he trusts to find suitable help." Catherine accepted Adam's hand as she climbed down from the wagon, noticing how his palm still cradled hers with the same gentleness he'd shown that day by the washtub. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Peterson. Please call me Catherine." "Only if you'll call me Sarah," the woman replied warmly. She gestured to the children. "This is Emma, and the little one is James." The older child peered shyly at Catherine from behind her mother's skirts, while the toddler on Sarah's hip regarded the newcomer with solemn eyes. "Let's get you settled," Sarah suggested. "Adam can bring your trunk to your room and I'll show you around the house." Catherine glanced at Adam, who nodded reassuringly. "Go on. I'll see to your things and the horses." The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly refined for a frontier home. The main room featured a large stone fireplace, comfortable furnishings, and shelves lined with books. Braided rugs covered sections of the plank flooring, and oil lamps hung from hooks on the walls. Father brought most of the furniture from St. Louis when he first built the place, Sarah explained, leading Catherine through to the kitchen. "Mother insisted on certain comforts, even out here in the wilderness." The kitchen was spacious, with a large cast iron cookstove, a pump for water at the sink, and a sturdy table that could easily seat 10. Copper pots hung from a rack overhead, and the pantry was well stocked. "You'll take your meals with us, of course," Sarah continued. "Father doesn't hold with the help eating separately. The ranch hands have their meals in the bunkhouse, but Adam usually joins us at the main house." Catherine followed as Sarah showed her the rest of the ground floor, which included Matthew Mitchell's study, a formal dining room, and a small sewing room. The east wing housed Sarah and Robert's quarters and the children's room. "And this will be your room," Sarah said, leading Catherine up a narrow staircase to the second floor. "It's not large, but it has a lovely view." The room was indeed small but charming, with a single bed, a chest of drawers, a washstand, and a rocking chair by the window. A colorful quilt covered the bed and fresh flowers stood in a jar on the windowsill. "It's lovely," Catherine said sincerely, thinking of her drafty cabin in town. Adam appeared in the doorway with her trunk. "Where would you like this, Miss Wilson?" "At the foot of the bed would be fine, thank you." He set it down carefully, then straightened. "Mr. Mitchell would like to meet you when you're settled. He's in his study." Sarah nodded. "I'll take her down once she's had a chance to freshen up." She turned to Catherine. "Take your time. The water pitcher is full." and there are towels in the drawer of the washstand. Left alone, Catherine took a moment to absorb her new surroundings. The room was spotless, the linens fresh, and the view from the window encompassed the entire ranch yard and the mountains beyond. For the first time since arriving in Montana Territory, she felt a sense of possibility rather than merely survival. After washing her face and hands and changing into a clean blouse, Catherine made her way downstairs to meet her new employer. She found Matthew Mitchell in his study, seated in a wheelchair behind a large oak desk. Despite his evident physical frailty, the man's eyes were keen and his handshake firm. "So you're the young lady Thornton's been talking about," he said, gesturing for her to take a seat. "Said you were hard-working and quick-witted." Catherine blinked, surprised that Adam had discussed her in such terms. "I appreciate Mr. Thornton's confidence, sir. I'll certainly do my best to prove worthy of it." Mitchell studied her for a moment. "Been taking in laundry in town, I hear." "Tough way to make a living." "Yes, sir, though I'm grateful for any honest work." The old man nodded approvingly. "Good attitude. We work hard here at the Rockingham, but we take care of our own. You'll have Sundays free, unless there's an emergency, and one Saturday a month if you want to go into town. Sarah will show you your duties, but mainly we need help with the cooking, cleaning, and looking after the little ones when she's busy with the ranch accounts." "I understand, Mr. Mitchell." "Matthew, please. Too old for formalities at my age." He smiled, softening his weathered features. "Any questions for me?" Catherine considered. "Just one, Sir Matthew. Mr. Thornton mentioned you built this ranch from nothing. I'd be interested to hear how you came to Montana Territory." The old man's eyes lit up. "Now that's a tale worth telling. Came out after the war with nothing but a mule and a dream." For the next half hour, Catherine listened as Matthew Mitchell recounted his journey west and the early years of establishing the ranch. His passion for the land and pride in what he'd built were evident in every word. When Sarah came to call them for the midday meal, Catherine felt she had a much better understanding of the Rockingham and the family who had built it. The first weeks at the ranch passed in a blur of new routines and faces. Catherine quickly settled into her duties, rising before dawn to help prepare breakfast for the family and the ranch hands. The work was hard but varied, and she found satisfaction in the rhythms of ranch life. Her hands, no longer subjected to harsh lye soap and constant immersion in water, began to heal. The cuts closed, the redness faded, and the constant pain subsided. She continued to use Adam's salve each night, grateful for the relief it provided. Adam himself was often busy with ranch work, riding out at first light and returning late. When their paths did cross, he was unfailingly polite, inquiring after her comfort and occasionally bringing small gifts from town, a ribbon for her hair, a new book he thought she might enjoy, once even a small pot of wild honey he'd discovered on the range. These gestures, delivered with shy smiles and sometimes stammered words, puzzled Catherine. She had met many men in her 22 years, but none who showed interest in such a gentle, undemanding way. One evening in late October, nearly 2 months after her arrival at the ranch, Catherine was sitting on the front porch enjoying the cool air after a long day of canning preserves with Sarah. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, and the distant mountains were cast in purple shadow. She heard footsteps and looked up to find Adam approaching, his hat in his hand. "Mind if I join you, Miss Wilson?" "Please do," she replied, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. "And I wish you'd call me Catherine. After all this time, Miss Wilson seems overly formal." He settled into the chair, placing his hat on his knee. "Catherine, then, as long as you'll call me Adam." "Adam," she agreed with a smile. "How was your day? Productive?" Got the last of the haying done before the weather turns. Winter comes early up here." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared. "Your hands look much better," Adam observed, glancing at her fingers as they rested on the arm of her chair. Catherine extended her hands, turning them over to examine them. "Almost completely healed, thanks to your mother's salve and the lack of laundry work. I'm glad." He hesitated, then added softly, "They're too fine for such rough treatment." Catherine felt a familiar warmth rise to her cheeks. "You're very kind, Adam, but they're just hands, meant for work." "And other things," he said, his voice low. Then, as if embarrassed by his boldness, he quickly changed the subject. "Matthew mentioned you might want to go into town this Saturday. I'll be driving in for supplies if you'd like to join me." "I would, thank you. There are a few things I need to check on at my cabin." Another silence fell between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Catherine found herself studying Adam's profile in the gathering dusk, the straight line of his nose, the set of his jaw, the way his dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "Can I ask you something, Catherine?" He said suddenly, "Of course. What brought you to Montana Territory? It's not an easy place for a woman alone." Catherine considered her answer. "Necessity, primarily. My father was a teacher in Philadelphia. When he died, there was very little left. I remembered my uncle had mentioned property out here, so I took a chance." "Your uncle, he passed too?" "Yes, some years ago. I never actually met him. He and my father had a falling out before I was born, but they exchanged letters in later years." Adam nodded thoughtfully. "Brave thing, coming all this way on your own." "Or foolish," Catherine replied with a small laugh. "The cabin was hardly what I'd expected." "And yet you made it work. Started your laundry business, kept yourself fed and housed." There was genuine admiration in his voice. "That takes courage and determination." "It takes the same qualities to build a ranch from nothing," she pointed out. "Matthew told me how you helped him expand the Rockingham, taking on more responsibility as his health declined." Adam shrugged modestly. "Just doing my job." "From what I've seen, you do far more than what's required of a foreman. The Mitchells consider you family." "They've been good to me," he acknowledged. "Gave me a home when I had none." The conversation drifted to other topics: books they'd read, places they'd seen or hoped to see someday, memories of childhood. Catherine was surprised at how easy it was to talk with Adam, how attentively he listened, how thoughtfully he responded. When Sarah called them in for supper, Catherine realized with a start that an hour had passed. As they rose to go inside, Adam hesitated, then spoke quietly. "I've enjoyed talking with you, Catherine." "As have I," she replied honestly. He smiled, a warm, genuine expression that transformed his face and made Catherine's heart beat a little faster. "Perhaps we could do this again sometime." "I'd like that," she said, returning his smile. Saturday's trip to town provided Catherine with her first opportunity to return to Silver Creek since coming to the ranch. The journey that had seemed so long on her first day now passed quickly in Adam's company. They discussed the changes in the landscape as autumn progressed, the prospects for winter, and the plans for spring planting. In town, while Adam attended to ranch business, Catherine visited her cabin. Mrs. Mitchell had kept it clean and aired as promised, but it felt small and empty after the warmth and activity of the ranch house. She collected a few personal items she'd left behind, paid Mrs. Mitchell for her caretaking, and arranged to continue the arrangement through the winter. As she completed her errands, Catherine realized she was looking forward to returning to the ranch, to the children's laughter, Sarah's friendship, old Matthew's stories, and she admitted to herself, to Adam's quiet presence. Somehow, in just 2 months, the rocking M had begun to feel like home. She met Adam at the general store as planned, where he was loading supplies into the wagon. He greeted her with a smile that seemed to brighten his whole face. "Got everything you need?" "Yes, thank you. The cabin is secure for winter, and I've settled accounts with Mrs. Mitchell." As Adam helped her onto the wagon seat, his hand lingered on hers a moment longer than necessary. Catherine felt a flutter in her chest at the contact, surprised by her own reaction. The return journey was delayed when a wheel on the wagon developed a worrying wobble. Adam stopped to examine it, frowning at what he found. "Axle pins working loose. Need to fix it before we go much further." He glanced at the sky. "It'll take some time and we're losing daylight." "There's a line camp about a mile ahead. We can spend the night there and head back to the ranch in the morning." Catherine nodded, trying to hide her concern. The prospect of spending the night alone with Adam was not improper given the circumstances, but it was certainly unusual. The line camp proved to be a small but sturdy cabin with a stone chimney, used by the ranch hands during roundups and when tending to distant sections of the property. It contained a rudimentary kitchen area, a table with 2 chairs, and a set of bunks built into the wall. Adam busied himself lighting a fire while Catherine examined the provisions stored in the cabinet. "There's coffee, beans, and some jerky," she reported. "I can put together a simple meal." "I brought some bread and cheese from town," Adam offered. "And there should be a canteen of water in the wagon." Working together, they prepared a modest supper. Outside, the temperature dropped rapidly as darkness fell, and Catherine was grateful for the warmth of the fire and the snug construction of the cabin. As they sat at the small table eating their simple meal, Adam seemed unusually quiet. "Is something troubling you?" Catherine asked. He looked up from his plate, his expression difficult to read in the flickering firelight. "Just thinking about how differently today might have gone if I'd checked that wheel more carefully before we left town." "You couldn't have known it would work loose," she reassured him. "Besides, this isn't so bad. The cabin is dry and warm, and we have food." Adam's eyes met hers across the table. "I'm concerned about your reputation, Catherine. An unmarried woman spending the night alone with a man, even under innocent circumstances." "We're stranded by necessity, not choice," she pointed out practically. "And who's to know anyway? We'll be back at the ranch by midday tomorrow." "Still," he insisted, "I'll sleep in the wagon, you take the bunks." "Don't be ridiculous," Catherine said firmly. "It's freezing outside. There are 2 bunks right there, perfectly proper." Adam looked like he might argue further, but then nodded reluctantly. "If you're certain." After they'd cleared away the supper things, Adam added more wood to the fire while Catherine made up the bunks with the blankets stored in a trunk beneath them. "I haven't slept in a cabin this small since my first year in the territory," Adam remarked, settling into a chair by the fire. "Oh," Catherine prompted, curious. "Spent a winter trapping with an old mountain man who showed me the ropes. Cabin about half this size, way up in the high country. Learned more in those months than in all my years in Texas." "Like what?" Catherine asked, taking the other chair. Adam smiled at the memory. "How to read weather from the sky, how to track game in snow, which plants are safe to eat, how to make snowshoes." Old Charlie knew everything about surviving in this country. "What happened to him, Charlie? Passed peacefully in his sleep about 5 years back. Left me his trap lines and this." Adam pulled a knife from his belt, the handle made of antler with intricate carvings. "Said I was the closest thing to a son he had." Catherine studied the knife with appreciation. "It's beautiful work. Charlie was a true craftsman." Adam returned the knife to its sheath. "What about you? Any skills beyond laundry and housekeeping?" "I play the piano, or did when I had access to one, and I'm quite good at sketching, inherited that from my mother. She was quite talented. I'd like to see your drawings sometime, Adam said, his voice warm with interest. I haven't drawn much since coming west, Catherine admitted. No time, and my materials were limited. We could get you some proper drawing paper and pencils next time we're in town, Adam suggested. The casual way he included her in future plans wasn't lost on Catherine. I'd like that, she said softly. As the evening progressed, their conversation continued, touching on childhood memories, hopes for the future, and the challenges and joys of life in the Montana Territory. Catherine found herself sharing thoughts she hadn't expressed to anyone in years: her grief at losing her parents, her fears upon arriving in Silver Creek alone, her growing attachment to the ranch and its inhabitants. Adam proved to be an attentive listener, offering insights from his own experiences without dominating the conversation. When he did speak of his past, Catherine was struck by his resilience in the face of hardship and his deep appreciation for the beauty and freedom of the frontier. "It's getting late," Adam finally said, noticing Catherine trying to suppress a yawn. "We should get some rest if we're to fix that wheel and get back to the ranch tomorrow." They prepared for sleep with a careful choreography of privacy. Adam stepped outside while Catherine changed into her nightgown and wrapped herself in a shawl. When he returned, she took the upper bunk while he extinguished all but one lamp and settled into the lower. "Good night, Catherine," he said, his voice low in the near darkness. "Good night, Adam. Thank you for the conversation. It was nice." "It was," he agreed. After a moment he added, "We should do this again sometime, perhaps with less wagon trouble and more comfortable surroundings." Catherine smiled into the darkness. "I'd like that very much." Sleep came easily despite the unfamiliar surroundings, and Catherine dreamed of wide open spaces and a future filled with possibilities she hadn't dared imagine before. The winter of 1875-76 proved to be one of the harshest in memory for the Montana Territory. Snow began falling in early November and continued intermittently through March, piling in deep drifts around the ranch buildings and making travel between the Rocking M and Silver Creek all but impossible for weeks at a time. For Catherine, the isolation might have been oppressive had it not been for the warmth of the Mitchell household and the deepening friendship with Adam. The long evenings were filled with shared meals, storytelling, music from the old piano in the parlor, and games with the children. When not busy with her duties, Catherine rediscovered her love of drawing, sketching portraits of the family, scenes from ranch life, and the stark beauty of the winter landscape. Adam had indeed purchased drawing materials for her during their last trip to town, before the heavy snows, presenting them with a shy smile that warmed her more than the roaring fire in the great room. In return, she drew a portrait of him that captured not just his features but something of his steady, thoughtful character. When she gave it to him on Christmas Day, his eyes had widened in surprise and pleasure. "No one's ever made anything like this for me before," he'd said, carefully tracing the edge of the paper with his finger. "Thank you, Catherine. I'll treasure it." Their friendship continued to deepen as the winter progressed. Adam began seeking out her company in the evenings, sometimes just to sit quietly while she sewed and he whittled or read, other times to engage in long conversations about books, ideas, or memories. They developed a comfortable familiarity, yet Catherine was increasingly aware of an undercurrent of something more: a quickening of her pulse when he entered a room, a lingering warmth where his hand touched hers when passing a dish at dinner, a tendency to seek out his face first when sharing news or a humorous observation. By February, Catherine could no longer deny to herself that her feelings for Adam had developed beyond friendship. Whether he felt the same remained uncertain. He was unfailingly kind and attentive, but never overstepped the boundaries of propriety. The opportunity to discover his feelings came unexpectedly in late February. A brief thaw had made travel possible, and Adam announced at breakfast that he would be riding to a neighboring ranch to discuss a potential cattle purchase. "It's a full day's ride each way," he explained. "I'll leave at first light tomorrow and be back the following evening." The next morning, Catherine rose early to prepare a parcel of food for his journey. She found him in the stable, saddling his horse. "Thought you might need this for the trail," she said, offering the package. "You're up early," Adam remarked, accepting the food with a grateful smile. "Didn't expect to see anyone before I left. I wanted to wish you safe travels." Catherine hesitated, then added, "And I brought you something else." She handed him a small leather-bound book. "It's a collection of poems. I thought you might enjoy having something to read in the evening." Adam's eyes softened as he took the book, his fingers brushing hers in the process. "That's very thoughtful, Catherine. Thank you." They stood for a moment in the pre-dawn darkness of the stable, the silence between them filled with unspoken words. Finally, Adam cleared his throat. "I should get going if I want to make Willow Creek by nightfall." "Of course." Catherine stepped back. "Be careful on the trail. The thaw may have made some sections treacherous." "I will." He mounted his horse, then looked down at her with an expression that made her heart skip. "I'll miss our evening conversations." "As will I," she admitted softly. With a final nod, Adam rode out into the gray light of early morning, leaving Catherine standing in the stable doorway, watching until he disappeared from sight. The day passed slowly without Adam's presence. Catherine found herself glancing toward the door whenever footsteps approached, only to be disappointed when it wasn't him. By evening, she had to acknowledge to herself just how central he had become to her daily life. "You're quiet tonight," Sarah observed as they sat by the fire after dinner, the children already in bed. "Just tired, I suppose," Catherine replied, focusing on her needlework. Sarah studied her with knowing eyes. "It's always quieter when Adam's away. He's been riding out less this winter than in years past. I think he prefers being here at the ranch lately." Catherine felt a blush warming her cheeks, but didn't reply. "He speaks very highly of you," Sarah continued casually. "Says you have a way of making him see things differently." "We've had many interesting conversations," Catherine acknowledged, keeping her tone neutral. Sarah smiled but didn't pursue the subject further, allowing Catherine to retreat into her thoughts. The following day brought an unexpected turn of events. By mid-morning, the sky had darkened ominously, and by noon, a fierce blizzard was raging. Catherine stood at the window, watching the swirling snow with growing concern. "Adam was supposed to start back today," she said to Matthew, who sat by the fire reading. The old man looked up, his weathered face creased with worry. "He knows better than to ride in this. He'll shelter at Willow Creek until it passes." But as the day wore on and the storm intensified, Catherine's anxiety grew. By evening, the wind was howling around the house, driving snow into drifts that reached halfway up the windows on the north side. "I'm worried about Adam," she confessed to Sarah as they prepared supper. "What if he started back before the storm hit?" Sarah laid a comforting hand on her arm. "Adam is the most experienced frontiersman I know. If he was caught on the trail, he knows how to find shelter and survive." Despite these reassurances, Catherine slept poorly that night, waking often to the sound of the wind and thoughts of Adam somewhere in the blinding snow. The storm continued through the next day, finally abating toward evening. The ranch hands had their hands full digging out the buildings and checking on the cattle closest to the home ranch. As darkness fell on the third day since Adam's departure, Catherine was helping Sarah with the dishes when they heard a commotion in the yard. They rushed to the window to see several ranch hands gathered around a horse and rider who had just arrived. "It's Adam," Sarah exclaimed. Catherine's heart leapt, then immediately constricted with fear as she saw him slump forward in the saddle. The men caught him as he fell, carrying him toward the house. She ran to the door, throwing it open as they approached. Adam's face was deathly pale except for patches of angry red on his cheeks and nose, the beginning signs of frostbite. His clothes were crusted with ice and snow. "Get him to the fire," Matthew directed from his wheelchair. "Sarah, fetch blankets. Catherine, help me prepare some hot broth." The men laid Adam on the sofa nearest the fireplace, removing his frozen outer garments. He was semi-conscious, mumbling incoherently as they worked. Catherine hurried to the kitchen, her hands shaking as she lit the stove and set water to boil. When she returned with a mug of broth, Sarah had wrapped Adam in blankets and was gently rubbing his hands to restore circulation. "He's been out in it too long," one of the ranch hands was saying. "Found him about 5 miles out, horse barely moving forward. Don't know how he stayed in the saddle." Catherine knelt beside the sofa, her heart in her throat as she looked at Adam's pale face. His eyes fluttered open, focusing with difficulty. "Catherine," he whispered. "I'm here," she said, taking his hand. It was ice cold in her warm grip. "You need to drink this." With Sarah's help, they managed to get him sitting up enough to sip the hot broth. Some color began returning to his face as the warmth spread through him. "The storm hit so suddenly," he explained between sips. "Thought I could outride it, make it back before the worst hit. Was wrong." "You should have stayed at Willow Creek," Matthew scolded gently. Adam's eyes found Catherine's. "Promised I'd be back," he said simply. The next few hours were focused entirely on warming Adam gradually and ensuring he suffered no lasting damage from his exposure to the elements. The frostbite on his face and hands was thankfully mild, but he was exhausted and chilled to the bone. When he was finally warm and properly fed, the ranch hands helped him to his room off the kitchen, the quarters traditionally assigned to the foreman, with a private entrance to the yard. Catherine prepared a hot brick wrapped in flannel for his bed and fresh water for his washstand. As the others dispersed to their own rooms for the night, she lingered, wanting to ensure he had everything he needed. "You should rest now," she told him, turning to leave. "Catherine, wait." Adam caught her hand, his grip still weaker than usual but warming rapidly. "The book you gave me. I read it on the trail. It helped when the storm hit. Gave me something to hold on to focus on besides the cold." She smiled, deeply touched. "I'm glad it provided some comfort." There was one poem in particular. He reached for the book on his nightstand, wincing slightly as his cold, stiffened fingers grasped it. He opened to a page marked with a scrap of paper. "This one made me think of you." Catherine took the book, her eyes falling on the title, "To Love and Be Loved." The poem spoke of finding solace and purpose in the love of another, of hands joined in both work and tenderness. "It's beautiful," she said softly, returning the book to him. "Like you," Adam replied, his voice low but steady, his eyes holding hers. "Catherine, I need to tell you something. When I was out there in that storm, not sure if I'd make it back, all I could think about was you. Your smile, your voice, the way you listen like every word matters." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "I've been falling in love with you since the day I saw your hands bleeding from laundry work. I just didn't know how to say it." Catherine's heart soared at his words, even as tears sprang to her eyes. "Oh, Adam, I've been falling in love with you too. I was so afraid when you didn't return, so afraid I'd never get to tell you." He raised a hand to her cheek, his touch gentle despite the lingering chill. "Those hands were made for holding," he repeated his words from months ago. and I want to hold them for the rest of my life if you'll let me." Catherine turned her face into his palm, pressing a kiss to it. "I will," she whispered. Despite his exhaustion, Adam's face lit with joy. He leaned forward and Catherine met him halfway, their lips meeting in a kiss that held all the warmth and promise of their shared future. The spring of 1876 brought renewal to the land and to Catherine's life. As the snow melted and the first green shoots appeared, she and Adam began planning their future together. With Matthew's blessing and knowing smile that suggested he'd seen this coming long before they set a June wedding date. In the meantime, Adam began construction on a small house of their own, situated on a rise overlooking the ranch headquarters. Catherine continued her duties at the main house, but spent every free moment planning their home and preparing for married life. Their courtship, though brief by Eastern standards, was filled with shared work and dreams. Adam taught Catherine to ride properly, and she discovered a love for exploring the vast Montana landscape on horseback. Together they visited her cabin in Silver Creek, now rented to a young schoolteacher, and rode to the highest points on Rockingham land to watch sunsets that painted the sky in impossible colors. In quiet moments, Adam would often take her hands in his, examining the now smooth skin and healthy nails with satisfaction. "No more bleeding fingers," he would say, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Thanks to you," Catherine would reply. "You saved me from a life of laundry." "You saved me too," he always answered, "from a life without love." Their wedding day dawned clear and warm, with wildflowers carpeting the meadows around the ranch. The ceremony took place beneath a canopy of cottonwood trees by the creek, with Matthew officiating from his wheelchair. Sarah stood beside Catherine, while Robert stood with Adam. The ranch hands and neighboring settlers gathered to witness the union, creating a celebration that lasted well into the night. As the sun set on their wedding day, Adam led Catherine to their new home. The small house was simple but solidly built, with large windows that caught the western light. Inside, he had furnished it with pieces he'd either made himself or carefully selected in town: a sturdy table with matching chairs, a comfortable sofa, a rocking chair by the hearth, and to Catherine's delight, a small piano he'd had shipped from Denver. "It's perfect," she breathed, taking in their home. "Absolutely perfect." "Not quite," Adam said with a smile, producing a small wrapped package from his pocket. "One more thing." Catherine unwrapped the gift to find a silver picture frame containing her drawing of him, carefully preserved. "So we can start our collection of memories," he explained. "I thought we might add to it over the years." "We will," she promised, setting the frame on the mantel. "Starting now." Adam took her hands in his, raising them to his lips. "These hands," he murmured against her fingers, "will build a life with me. We'll hold our children someday. We'll grow old with mine." Catherine's heart swelled with happiness as she entwined her fingers with his. "They were made for holding," she agreed, leaning forward to kiss her husband as the last light of their wedding day gilded their new home in gold. And so began their life together on the Rockingham Ranch, their love a beacon in the vast Montana wilderness, their hands joined in both work and tenderness for all the days to come. 5 years later, Catherine sat on the porch of their expanded home, watching as Adam taught their 4-year-old son Matthew to ride his pony in the yard. Their 2-year-old daughter Elizabeth played at her feet, arranging wooden blocks into precarious towers. Catherine's hands, still smooth despite the ranch work she shared with Adam, rested on her rounded belly where their 3rd child grew. The Rockingham had prospered under Adam's management. After old Matthew passed peacefully 2 winters prior, he had left the ranch jointly to Sarah and Adam, acknowledging the foreman as the son of his heart if not his blood. Together with Robert and Sarah, they had expanded the operation, adding sheep to the cattle and establishing one of the most successful ranches in the territory. Catherine's drawings had gained recognition as well. A visitor from Helena had seen her sketches of frontier life and commissioned a series for publication in Eastern newspapers. Her illustrations of Montana Territory, its landscapes, its people, its daily life now appeared regularly in journals across the country, bringing the beauty and challenges of the frontier to those who had never ventured west. As the sun began to set, Adam lifted Matthew from the pony and set him on his shoulders, carrying him toward the porch with exaggerated stomping steps that made the boy giggle with delight. "Mama," Matthew called, "Papa says I ride better than he did when he was little." "That's because you have an excellent teacher," Catherine replied with a smile for her husband. Adam set their son down and settled beside Catherine on the porch swing, automatically reaching to take her hand in his. It was a gesture repeated countless times over their years together, yet it never lost its meaning or comfort. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his free hand moving to rest lightly on her belly. "Wonderful," she assured him. "The baby's been active today." Adam's face softened with tenderness. "Another Thornton with boundless energy. Heaven help us." Catherine laughed, leaning her head against his shoulder as they watched their children play in the golden evening light. "Do you ever think about that day, when you first saw my hands bleeding from the laundry work?" "Often," Adam admitted. "I remember how brave you looked, trying to hide your pain. How determined. I knew then that you were someone special, though I never imagined just how special you would become to me. And I thought you were merely being kind," Catherine mused. "I had no idea those simple words would change my entire life." Adam raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm as he had done so many times before. "Those hands were made for holding," he repeated softly, "and I've never been more right about anything in my life." As the sun dipped below the distant mountains, painting the Montana sky in shades of pink and gold, Catherine Thornton looked at her family, at the life she and Adam had built together, and knew with absolute certainty that her hands had indeed found their true purpose, not in endless labor, but in loving and being loved in return.